What happens when one of Hollywood's biggest stars goes head-to-head with one of daytime television's most powerful hosts? When Brad Pitt walked onto the View set, nobody expected the explosive confrontation that would unfold between him and Whoopi Goldberg. What started as a routine promotional interview quickly spiraled into a heated battle of words that left the entire panel stunned and ultimately resulted in Pitt being escorted off the set. This is the story of how a simple question about his latest project turned into one of the most dramatic moments in daytime television history. Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment below about what you think really triggered this massive blowout. The morning sun streamed through the windows of the View studio as the production team made final preparations for what was supposed to be a straightforward interview. Brad Pitt was scheduled to discuss his upcoming film, a passion project about environmental activism that he had been developing for years. The show's producers had assured his team that this would be a friendly, promotional chat, nothing more than the usual celebrity interview format that The View was known for. Whoopi Goldberg sat at her usual spot at the table, reviewing her notes with a stern expression. As the show's moderator and executive producer, she had built a reputation for asking tough questions. But lately, her approach had become increasingly confrontational. The other hosts, Joy Behar, Sarah Haynes, Sunny Hostin, and Alyssa Farah Griffin, were already seated, engaging in light conversation as they waited for the segment to begin. "Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to The View," Whoopi announced as the cameras rolled. "We're here with Academy Award winner Brad Pitt, who's joining us to talk about his new environmental thriller." "Brad, thanks for being here." Brad flashed his trademark smile and settled into his chair. "Thanks for having me, Whoopi. I'm excited to talk about this project. It's something I've been passionate about for a long time." "Right, so this movie," Whoopi began, her tone already carrying a hint of skepticism. "It's about climate change, corporate greed, all that stuff. But here's what I want to know, Brad. You're sitting here talking about environmental issues while you own multiple homes around the world, fly private jets everywhere, and live a lifestyle that probably has a carbon footprint bigger than entire small towns. Don't you think that's a little hypocritical?" The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Brad's smile faltered slightly, but he maintained his composure. "Well, Whoopi, I think that's a fair question, but it's also a bit more complex than that. The film addresses exactly these kinds of contradictions in our society. We all have to examine our own behavior while also pushing for systemic change." "Systemic change," Whoopi repeated, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "That's a convenient way to deflect from personal responsibility, isn't it? You Hollywood types love to lecture the rest of us about how to live while you're living in glass houses." Joy Behar shifted uncomfortably in her seat, sensing the tension building. "Whoopi, maybe we should focus on the actual movie, what it's about, the story itself." But Whoopi wasn't finished. "No, Joy, I think this is exactly what we should be talking about. Brad, you've made millions of dollars, you live in luxury, and now you want to make a movie telling regular people they need to change their lives. How is that not the height of Hollywood elitism?" Brad's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice steady. "I never said I was perfect, Whoopi, but I've also put my money where my mouth is. I've funded renewable energy projects, I've worked with environmental organizations, and I've used my platform to raise awareness about these issues. This movie isn't about lecturing anyone, it's about starting a conversation." "Starting a conversation," Whoopi scoffed. "Is that what we're calling it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like another wealthy celebrity trying to stay relevant by jumping on whatever cause is trending." Sarah Haynes attempted to intervene. "Brad, can you tell us about the research you did for this role? I understand you spent time with actual environmental activists." "I did, Sarah, and it was eye-opening," Brad replied, grateful for the redirection. "I worked with scientists, activists, people on the front lines of environmental disasters. The stories they told me were heartbreaking and inspiring. This film is really their story, not mine." But Whoopi wasn't about to let the conversation shift away from her attack. "Oh, so now you're speaking for environmental activists? You spent a few weeks with them, and now you're their voice? That's not presumptuous at all." The atmosphere in the studio grew increasingly tense. Sunny Hostin looked between her colleagues, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the interview. "Whoopi, I think Brad is trying to use his platform responsibly. Isn't that what we want from celebrities with influence?" "What I want," Whoopi shot back, "is honesty. And what I'm hearing is a lot of virtue signaling from someone who's never had to worry about paying an electric bill or deciding between gas money and groceries." Brad's patience was beginning to wear thin. Whoopi, I may be privileged, but that doesn't mean I can't care about these issues or try to make a difference. And frankly, your approach here feels less like journalism and more like a personal attack. Personal attack? Whoopi's voice rose. I'm asking you legitimate questions about your credibility on this issue. If you can't handle that, maybe you shouldn't be making movies about subjects you clearly don't understand. Alyssa Farah Griffin looked alarmed at the escalating confrontation. Maybe we should take a quick break and regroup. No, Whoopi said firmly. We're going to finish this conversation. Brad, you want to talk about environmental issues? Fine. But first, tell me how many flights you've taken this year alone. Tell me about the carbon footprint of your latest movie production. Tell me about the environmental impact of your lifestyle choices before you start preaching to the rest of us. Brad leaned forward, his diplomatic facade finally cracking. You know what, Whoopi? You're right about one thing. I am privileged. But at least I'm trying to do something constructive with that privilege, instead of sitting here tearing down people who are trying to make a difference. The tension in the studio was palpable. The other hosts exchanged worried glances, while the production team scrambled to figure out how to handle the increasingly hostile exchange. What had started as a routine celebrity interview was quickly becoming a full-scale confrontation that threatened to spiral completely out of control. The words hung in the air like a challenge thrown down between two opponents. Whoopi's eyes narrowed as she processed Brad's pushback, her expression darkening with each passing second. The other host sat frozen, watching what was supposed to be a friendly promotional interview transform into a battlefield. Excuse me? Whoopi's voice was dangerously low. Are you suggesting that I'm not constructive? That I don't make a difference? I've been fighting for causes since before you were even famous, Brad. I've used my platform to address real issues, not just make pretty movies about them. Brad shook his head, his frustration now clearly visible. That's not what I said, and you know it. But what you're doing right now, this aggressive interrogation, it's not about the issues. It's about something else entirely. Oh, really? Whoopi leaned back in her chair, her voice taking on a mocking tone. Enlighten us, Brad. What is this really about? Please, share your Hollywood wisdom with us simple daytime television hosts. Joy Behar tried once again to redirect the conversation. Look, maybe we can all take a step back here. Brad, why don't you tell us about the actual story of the film? What's the plot? But Brad's attention remained fixed on Whoopi. You want to know what I think this is about? I think you're so used to being the authority in this room that you can't handle having a conversation with someone who might actually know what they're talking about. You've decided to make me the enemy before I even had a chance to speak. The accusation struck a nerve. Whoopi's composure cracked completely. Know what you're talking about? You're an actor, Brad. You pretend to be other people for a living. You don't know anything about the real world, about real struggles, about what it's like to actually fight for change instead of just writing checks. Writing checks? Brad's voice rose for the first time. You think that's all I do? I've been to disaster zones. I've worked with my hands rebuilding communities. I've sat with families who've lost everything to climate disasters. But sure, Whoopi, reduce it all to writing checks because that fits your narrative better. Sarah Haynes looked desperately at the production team off camera, silently pleading for intervention. Maybe we should focus on the positive aspects of environmental activism, the hope that the movie brings to these issues. Hope? Whoopi laughed bitterly. You want to talk about hope? How about the hope that celebrities would stop using serious issues as publicity stunts? How about the hope that people like Brad would actually use their privilege responsibly instead of making vanity projects? Vanity project? Brad's restraint finally snapped. This film took 5 years to make. I mortgaged my own house to fund it when studios wouldn't touch it. I've worked with the best environmental scientists in the world, but you've already decided it's worthless because it doesn't fit your predetermined opinion of me. Sunny Hostin attempted to mediate. Brad, I think what Whoopi is trying to say is that there's a concern about authenticity when celebrities tackle serious issues. How do you address those concerns? Thank you, Sunny. That's exactly what I'm trying to say, Whoopi interrupted, but her tone suggested she wasn't interested in diplomatic solutions. Authenticity. That's what's missing here. You can't authentically speak about environmental issues when your lifestyle is part of the problem. Brad stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. You know what, Whoopi? You're absolutely right. I'm part of the problem. We all are. That's the whole point of the film. But at least I'm trying to be part of the solution instead of sitting here attacking people who are trying to make a difference. Sit down, Brad, Whoopi commanded. her voice sharp with authority. "We're not finished here." "Actually, we are," Brad replied, remaining standing. "This isn't an interview, it's an ambush. You invited me here under false pretenses so you could grandstand and make yourself look tough at my expense." The accusation hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Whoopi's face flushed with anger. "False pretenses? You came here to promote your movie, and I'm asking you legitimate questions about your credibility. If you can't handle that, maybe you shouldn't be making movies about subjects you clearly don't understand." "There it is again," Brad said, his voice now filled with controlled fury. "You keep saying I don't understand, but you haven't asked me a single question about the actual research, the actual science, the actual story we're telling. You've just attacked my character from the moment I sat down." Alyssa Farah Griffin tried desperately to restore order. "Maybe we can agree that these are important issues that deserve serious discussion, and we can have that discussion respectfully." "Respectfully?" Whoopi's voice dripped with sarcasm. "I'm being perfectly respectful. I'm asking hard questions that need to be asked. If Brad can't handle that, maybe he should stick to action movies where he doesn't have to think." The insult was deliberate and cutting. Brad's eyes flashed with anger. "You know what, Whoopi? You're right about one thing. I should stick to what I know. And what I know is that this conversation is over." He started to remove his microphone, his movements sharp and decisive. The other hosts watched in stunned silence as the situation spiraled completely out of control. "Oh, you're leaving?" Whoopi's voice was triumphant. "That's what I thought. When the going gets tough, the privileged Hollywood elite runs away. Very brave, Brad. Very authentic." Brad stopped mid-motion, his hand still on his microphone clip. For a moment, the studio was completely silent, except for the hum of the cameras and the distant sounds of the production crew. When he looked up at Whoopi, his expression was one of barely contained rage. "You want authentic?" he said quietly, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. "Here's authentic. You're a bully. You use your position to attack people because it makes you feel powerful. You've turned what should be a conversation about important issues into a personal vendetta, and frankly, it's pathetic." The words hit Whoopi like a physical blow. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The other hosts sat in shocked silence, unable to believe what they were witnessing. "You want to question my credibility?" Brad continued, his voice gaining strength. "Fine, but let's question yours too. When's the last time you actually reported on environmental issues instead of just using them as talking points? When's the last time you engaged with a guest in good faith instead of trying to score points for your audience?" Whoopi found her voice, and when she spoke, it was with pure venom. "How dare you come into my house and talk to me like that? This is my show, and I'll run it however I see fit. You're just another entitled celebrity who thinks he can waltz in here and demand respect without earning it." "Earning it?" Brad's laugh was bitter. "I've been nothing but respectful since I walked in here. You're the one who turned this into a fight. You're the one who made it personal. And now you're playing the victim because someone finally called you out on your behavior." The confrontation had reached a boiling point. Joy Behar looked frantically at the production team, mouthing "commercial break" repeatedly. Sarah Haynes had her hands pressed to her mouth in shock. Sunny Hostin and Alyssa Farah Griffin sat frozen, unable to process what they were witnessing. The studio felt like a powder keg ready to explode. Whoopi's face was flushed with rage, her hands gripping the edge of the table so tightly her knuckles had turned white. The other hosts sat paralyzed, watching their colleague and their guest locked in a battle that had spiraled far beyond anything they had ever witnessed on daytime television. "Playing the victim?" Whoopi's voice was shaking with fury. "You come on my show, you disrespect me in front of my audience, and then you have the audacity to lecture me about behavior? You don't know anything about what I've been through, what I've accomplished, or what I've sacrificed to get where I am." Brad's expression was stone cold. "And you don't know anything about me either, but that didn't stop you from attacking me the second I sat down. You made assumptions, you launched personal attacks, and now you're angry because someone stood up to you." "Stood up to me?" Whoopi laughed harshly. "Is that what you think you're doing? You're having a tantrum because someone asked you tough questions. This is what happens when celebrities live in bubbles where everyone tells them how wonderful they are." "Tough questions?" Brad's voice rose again. "You didn't ask me about the science behind climate change. You didn't ask me about the communities affected by environmental disasters. You didn't ask me about the solutions we explore in the film. You attacked my character and my lifestyle before I could even explain what the movie is about." Joy Behar finally found her voice, her words coming out in a rush. Can we please just take a commercial break? Please? This is getting out of hand. But Whoopi waved her off dismissively. No, Joy. We're gonna finish this. Brad wants to talk about tough questions? Fine. Let's talk about your divorce settlements, your custody battles, your personal life that's been splashed across tabloids for decades. Let's talk about your credibility when it comes to lecturing people about responsibility. The low blow hit its mark. Brad's face went pale, then flushed with anger. My personal life? What does that have to do with environmental issues? You're so desperate to win this argument that you're willing to attack my family? I'm willing to expose the hypocrisy, Whoopi shot back. You want to be taken seriously as an environmental activist? Then maybe you should get your own house in order first. Sarah Haynes stood up abruptly, her chair rolling backward. Whoopi, that's enough. This has gone too far. Sit down, Sarah, Whoopi snapped without taking her eyes off Brad. Adults are talking. The dismissive treatment of her colleague was the final straw for Brad. Don't you dare talk to her like that. Sarah was trying to help you salvage what's left of your professionalism, and you just humiliated her on national television. Professionalism? Whoopi's voice was incredulous. You want to lecture me about professionalism? You're the one who stood up and started a fight. I stood up because you made it impossible to have a civil conversation, Brad replied, his voice steady despite his obvious anger. You turned an interview into an interrogation, and when I tried to defend myself, you made it personal. And now you're taking it out on your own colleagues. Sunny Hostin attempted one last intervention. Maybe we can all agree that emotions are running high and we should take a moment to cool down. But Whoopi was beyond reason. Emotions are running high because Brad can't handle being challenged. He's so used to people kissing his feet that he can't deal with someone asking him real questions. Real questions? Brad's composure finally shattered completely. You want real questions? Here's one. When did you become such a bitter, angry person that you can't have a conversation without trying to destroy someone? When did you decide that your job was to tear people down instead of actually informing your audience? The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Whoopi's face went through a range of emotions: shock, hurt, and finally, pure rage. When she spoke, her voice was barely controlled. Get him out of here, she said quietly, looking directly at the production team. Get him out of here right now. Whoopi, Alyssa Farah Griffin tried to intervene. Maybe we should just end the segment. I said get him out, Whoopi repeated, her voice rising. I want him off my set. Security, escort Mr. Pitt out of the building. Brad started laughing, a sound devoid of humor. Security? Really? You're calling security because someone finally told you the truth about your behavior? You're done here, Whoopi said, standing up for the first time during the entire confrontation. This is my show, and I'm telling you to leave. Don't worry, Brad said, finally removing his microphone and placing it on the table. I wouldn't stay another minute in this toxic environment if you paid me. But I want your audience to know that this is what happens when someone tries to have an honest conversation about important issues on your show. Two security guards appeared at the edge of the set, looking uncomfortable but moving toward Brad's position. The other host watched in stunned silence as the situation reached its climax. You want to make this about important issues? Whoopi's voice was filled with contempt. You came here to sell a movie, not save the world. Don't pretend this was ever about anything more than your own ego. Brad looked at her for a long moment, his expression a mixture of disgust and pity. You know what, Whoopi? You're absolutely right. This was never about important issues. Because you made it impossible to discuss them. You turned it into a personal attack from the beginning. And now, you're trying to rewrite history to make yourself look like the victim. The security guards reached Brad's position, but he held up his hand. It's fine, gentlemen. I'm leaving voluntarily. I wouldn't want to spend another second in the presence of someone who treats her guests and her colleagues with such disrespect. That's right, run away, Whoopi called after him as he started toward the exit. Run back to your mansion in your private jets and tell everyone how mean the lady on television was to you. Brad stopped and turned back one final time. You know what the saddest part of all this is, Whoopi? You had a chance to have a real conversation about issues that matter. You had a platform to actually make a difference. Instead, you chose to make it about your own need to feel superior. That's not just unprofessional, it's a betrayal of your audience and your colleagues. With that, he walked off the set, the security guards following at a respectful distance. The studio fell into an eerie silence, broken only by the sound of the cameras continuing to roll and the distant murmur of the shocked production crew. Whoopi remained standing, her chest heaving with anger and adrenaline. The other hosts sat in stunned silence, unable to process what they had just witnessed. Joy Behar stared at her hands. Sarah Haynes looked like she was fighting back tears. Sunny Hostin sat frozen with her mouth slightly open, and Alyssa Farah Griffin kept glancing between Whoopi and the exit where Brad had disappeared. "Well," Whoopi finally said, her voice hoarse from the confrontation, "I guess that's what happens when celebrities can't handle the real world." But her words rang hollow in the aftermath of the explosive encounter. The damage was done, the bridges burned, and the entire television industry would be talking about this confrontation for years to come. What had started as a routine promotional interview had become one of the most dramatic moments in daytime television history. A perfect storm of ego, ideology, and irreconcilable differences that exploded in spectacular fashion. And there you have it. The complete story of how Brad Pitt's appearance on The View turned into an all-out war of words that ended with him being escorted off the set. What do you think triggered Whoopi's aggressive approach from the very beginning? Was it jealousy, a personal vendetta, or something else entirely? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and make sure to subscribe for more explosive celebrity confrontations and behind-the-scenes drama that the mainstream media won't tell you about.